Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Psycosmos. Today, we're gonna be talking with Andrew once again, our good friend, GrowThroughDeceit. He's gonna be going through some stuff about the Constitution and some lesser-known court cases and that sort of thing, and some lesser-known American history, hopefully as well. So, stay tuned for more. All right, everybody, welcome back to another Psycosmos podcast. We're joined once again by our good friend Andrew, GrowThroughDeceit. So definitely check him out. And we're going to be talking, as we said in the intro, about some stuff to do with the Constitution and some important case laws. So would you take us away, Andrew?
Hey, you bet. And thank you, Rich, for having me on again. I always appreciate doing fun work with you guys. We have some great banter back and forth, and I think it's great to expose what these truths. They're important and well, anyhow, as I was talking about last time, uh, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution, the original Constitution itself, in my opinion, are the only three documents that we need in order to govern ourselves effectively in small groups, like maybe say 100, the
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson's 100s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we could get those together and maybe scrap everything else. Repeal everything else and go back to those three documents, and not exclusively for the ever till the end of time, but maybe we could scrap everything and start again from that basic foundation. And that's been my assertion. And so I was talking last time about, I went through the Declaration of Independence, and I talked about some parts of the Bill of Rights,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a little bit hung up on, not hung up, but we focused on the Second Amendment, and because it is written in Warren versus District of Columbia that the police do not owe any specific duty to provide police services to specific
Mm-hmm.
citizens or any individuals, right? So then it becomes our own duty, and it always has been, to protect ourselves, and we do that through the Second Amendment. Okay. Well, the Second Amendment protects how we do that, is I
Right,
guess what I'm
right.
trying to say. We don't get those rights from any document or anything like this. And I went to, just to fill you in, Rich, I went as far as to say, you know, we should have no background checks. We should have the ability to print a gun without any serial numbers right from my living room,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I mean, that is what the Second Amendment means to me. And we talked a little bit about, you know, not vilifying and dehumanizing those who commit bad acts, but also identifying with them and making it so, you know, they are actually exactly like us, as opposed to, oh my gosh, they're so different than us and there's nothing there's similar, and therefore we are exempt from having to address anything that caused that,
Mm-hmm.
right? These shootings, which guarantees that they're going to happen again if we treat it that way. Whereas if we treat it with empathy, anyhow, I don't mean to sit and dwell on that, but let's turn that corner, and I'll just jump back into um, what I was doing yesterday, unless you wanted to comment on any of those things, Rich.
No, I do agree with what you were saying about not overly vilifying the people who do this, because that's like a really common thing with any people who commit atrocities in history. Is people just tend to identify them as like an outlier, like a super special version of evil that's like removed from humanity at large. And I think more people need to realize that if there's still people in that one, like you said, they deserve some measure of empathy, some effort at rehabilitation, like genuine rehabilitation. But then on the other hand of that is that people need to realize that they themselves, in the right circumstances, could very well do something evil like that, because that's where it comes from. It comes from we are the best and we are the worst. Like that's our kind of our thing as humans. Maximum potential for good and for bad.
Yeah, I agree with you, and yep, sometimes we neglect to take the whole picture in,
Mm-hmm.
and the mainstream media has been less than responsible in delivering any of that, right?
That's for sure. To put it mildly.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump back into the Bill of Rights then. Well, because I talked about the Constitution and it being a short document, I wanted to, what my main part of this part of what I'm doing, my main goal, excuse me, is to make this reading the Declaration of Independence. Look at how I want to make it so that it's accessible.
Mhm.
Here's how long it is, right? There's the Declaration of Independence, and that's where it ends.
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it's a simple document it might not be simple, but if you read it a couple times, it's written so where you can, you can read it easily. It doesn't have to be a year-long task, right? I'm just getting through the Constitution here, and that is what, 11 pages, right? And so I mean, it's not too terrible. And then when I have the Bill of Rights here, that's 5 pages. Okay.
Damn.
Oh, the Bill of Rights, excuse me, that's actually only 2 pages. The full list of amendments is 5 pages. So if we want to educate ourselves about how we're governed, I mean, it doesn't take much effort, and I'm trying to make it accessible to everybody because I was 31 when I read these documents, right? And I think people are ashamed that they haven't, and therefore don't. And I say, put away the shame and read up on it. What do you think, Rich?
Definitely. I would agree, and I would say that it's kind of one of those things in school where it seems like I swear there was some reverse psychology going on with certain things when we were kids, and like so like hating math, that would be one of them. Because like math is actually kind of cool and kind of important. But the way that they were like, it's so important, it's so important. I feel like as kids we were like, all right, I don't want to deal with this. And there was a similar thing with like I guess our government structure, and because I want to say in school, at least where I went to school in New York, they did give us the documents and you could read them, but there wasn't a real emphasis on actually understanding them or the principles that they put behind it. It's like there was no talk about how it was kind of unique how for the Constitution, instead of saying this government is granting you these rights, it's saying these rights exist within you, everyone, period, and the government's job is to make sure that it and others don't encroach on them, which is like really different, but not a lot of people don't get that level of principles where our foundational documents were coming from and how rare that actually is in the world, because you can go through and read other countries' constitutions and founding documents and they're very, very different in terms of where they're coming from with setting up the government.
Very, yes, very good assertion there. I didn't really ever think to compare it to other countries, but ours is the most unique in that it explicitly states that, we're going to limit our own government. We have the power here, and anybody that doesn't like that is subject to extreme consequences.
Yeah.
Right? So uh, I highly encourage everybody to reread it. I actually in my and this is a shameful thing, but I'll call it out. Whatever. In the Maple Grove School District in Minnesota, and also in Edina, Minnesota, I was not ever required to read any of those three documents in any social studies class. And we didn't have any memorize this for a test. It was not there was no mention of it in this particular book, which I found when I went to go get the mail one time. Which it must be a middle school social studies book. These are in the back of the book, as in the reference section. They are in the first part of the reference section, and good for them. But I wonder where these things sit in the current curriculum.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, is it somewhere in between, transgenders twerking and kitty litter in the bathroom? You
If
know,
if, it, if it's even in there.
right? It's getting to be too much. I made a joke the other day that if I wanted to, because I went to school to be a teacher, and I found out that you can't teach children the truth, which is silly. so, so I made the joke that if I actually wanted to go into the school and teach children the truth, I would have to dress up and start twerking
Yeah,
in order to just do so.
that probably gets you in the door nowadays.
I think it's so crazy and silly, right? Teach the kids the Constitution, but first I gotta twerk. All right. So I'll just jump in really quick. Like, okay, so yesterday I'll just cover the Constitution as I blow right through it. I'm not going to read anything. I'm just honestly going to introduce the sections and name them so that people have some kind of, oh, that's where I can find this. It's like a reference quick, okay,
Got it,
Rich,
got
and
it.
pause me at any time if you want to add to anything that might pop out at you that you want to mention,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But yesterday I did mention that the Article 1 is the legislative branch, and it states explicitly in Section 1 who has the power to create rules, and it's only them. So the EPA or the CIA or the FBI or the DEA might think that they have the ability to create rules, but they don't. And we found that out explicitly from what was it? The EPA versus West Virginia, also a very recent decision, uh, confirmed this.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of people don't know that a lot of those agencies, it's delegating like authority, and they don't get that. Like in a lot of ways, the EPA is a pretty good example, but there's so many different bureaucracies. But they basically have the power of making laws when they come in and they make up these regulations. And as you said with the first article, it's explicitly given only to the branches of Congress that can actually make laws. And I see a lot of legal experts and scholars making the argument that even though it's not said, it's implied that delegation is okay. And they say something like, "Oh, well, there's just so much stuff to do. You can't expect Congress to do it all." And it's like, well, number one, they're signing themselves up for these jobs, and number two, I don't think a lot of people get the actual like root problem with the idea that they can just delegate stuff, because all it ends up doing is obfuscating the power. It decentralizes it, but not in a good way. And now instead of just having to change a law, you have to go through all these different levels of bureaucracy. You get tied up in court fees, flooded with documents, buried under that. And just I just think people, they don't get why it could be a bad thing to have all these bureaucracies exactly. And I think like that's a huge part of why, is that it messes everything up, so that you can't just go to Congress and be like, you passed this law that messed up, now you got to fix it. Now you got to go through all these different bureaucracies.
you're right. Yes, it's like trying to hold Pfizer accountable for killing people with a death shot, right?
Yeah, you
They
can't.
had in a You can't, because they have this LLC and this LLC and this LLC, and who owns it? Well, this trust. Well, that's been embedded in this trust and this trust. And okay, well, how am I? If I was a perfect archer, where is my target even? I can't even see it. Is it moving? Is it,
Yeah.
So it's how many walls is it behind? So something like that. It seems to be a fractal, self similarity here that you mentioned with Congress and the delegation, as what we see with holding corporations accountable for their atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem calling them out by name. Hopefully you guys don't either, but
No,
there we go.
never been a big fan of Pfizer. I like telling people, hey, do you know who had to pay the largest criminal fine in history? Like who? I'm like, Pfizer, the people who made the lovely treatment for COVID. Yeah, it's them. Yeah.
Right. It's them, those guys. That lovely treatment. Oh, you're so wonderful. Uh, okay, so that is section one of Article One. So Article One outlines the entire legislative branch. And then section two talks about the House of Representatives, organization and power of impeachment. Section three is about the Senate and try powers to try cases of impeachment and their organization, right? And then section four is the election and meeting of Congress. Section 5 is Congress's rules of procedure, powers, quorum, journals, meeting adjournments. Section 6 is pay, privileges, and limitations. Section 7 is the procedure in passing bills and the president's veto power. Section 8 is the powers that are delegated to Congress, and they even number them 1 through 18. Section 9 is powers denied to Congress, and they number those 1 through 8. And section 10 is the restriction on states' powers, and they number those 1 through 3. And that's the end of Article 1. And then we get into Article 2, which is the executive branch, president and vice president, and those kinds of folks. And these are the people executing on the laws that are created by Congress. Not speaking on the ones that they delegated to those agencies you just mentioned, right? Or we just mentioned together. But the way that it should go is that the executive branch handles the execution. And so we've got, so section 1 is the president and vice president, and their election qualifications and oath. And there's some numbered sections that go up to number 8. And then section 2 is the powers of the president, listed numbers 1 through 3. Section 3 is the duties of the president. Section 4 is the impeachment and removal from office for crimes. And that's an incredibly short section. So, I mean, if you wanted to really look into what the heck they're doing with Trump, you could probably get a good idea of how they're doing it incorrectly by just simply reading Section 4 of Article 2 of the Constitution. So we've got Article 3, which is the judicial branch. And Section 1 is federal courts' tenure of office. And here I just wanted to mention really quick, like it mentions the judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. Now, oftentimes you go to court and you're trying to defend yourself,
Mhm.
right? And they are like, if you do that again, I'm gonna hold you in contempt of court. They threaten contempt of court, and then they have what? Bailiffs holding guns, right?
Yep.
And so they're performing a misdemeanor crime against you, but having the bailiff there, they're doing it in the presence of a firearm or in possession of a firearm, which escalates that to a felony. So they're committing a felony, and they're going against Article 3, Section 1 of holding their office during good behavior. It's not good behavior to threaten
No,
a contempt of court.
no, usually not.
I wouldn't think so. Did you? I mean, have you seen things relating to that, or did you want to comment on that any further, Rich?
In that particular case, it's funny to me because, as far as I understand, there's like a code of conduct for judges, and it's like supposed to be pretty strict, and it's pretty, I guess, elaborate. But one of the things about it is, yeah, constantly being like cool, calm, collected, treating people respectfully and courteously, and that sort of thing. Um, and it, clips are clips, but I feel like I've seen an awful lot of footage and heard an awful lot of interactions with judges where they don't seem to be acting that way. So I guess it just makes you think about how exactly stringent they are with applying that code of conduct. Especially like you said,
Yelling.
yeah, yelling. Especially like you said with the contempt of court thing, because it seems like that gets thrown around uh, quite a bit, and it confuses me because most people when they're in a court, they are not in a position of power like at all. So I don't really get the unnecessary power plays that judges seem to want to make on top of the fact that you've got this poor schmuck doesn't know how half this stuff works, gets appointed somebody to represent him, he's like terrified, no idea what's gonna happen, like, and then on top of that you're gonna, like you said, get the bailiff out here, brandish the firearm. I don't like what you're saying, you gotta calm down, this is totally gonna de-escalate things.
Right, yeah, you bet. Yeah. Well, I want to comment on that now, just a quick second here on if you think about it this way, and maybe you'd agree, if you know that you're committing a crime against somebody else, wouldn't that be exactly your behavior? To remain constantly intimidating on them and
Mm,
make sure that they still feel this small when they actually do walk in with the most power in the courtroom,
mm,
right? And
that's a good
so
point.
that they would their behavior reflects that of a thief or a extension of a tyrant
Yeah,
or a
petty
private banker,
tyrant,
right?
definitely.
There you go. Yeah,
Definitely.
there you go. Thank you. Petty tyrant. It's
There's a lot of those nowadays, for sure.
it gets too much, right? So the defendants, the poor defendants, are defendant in error, right? The I just watched a quick TikTok about how we do have our Article 3 court right when we walk in, but we throw it away by our conduct in court, and then
Mm.
they're able to, do what they do in commerce, or behave as the private entity in commerce. Well, um, but Article 3 is right there, and it is about the judicial branch. Section 1 talks about that, good behavior. Section 2 is jurisdiction of federal courts. Section 3 is going to be treason, conviction of, and punishment for. And then we get into Article 4, which is the relations among the states. Section 1 is the uh, full faith and credit. And this I found very interesting, right? This is the full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. So, a good example, and that simply means that the states have to respect the other states' regulations and laws, right? And a good example of this, even though I'm not a huge proponent, but a good example of this is how you can use a California driver's license in New York,
Hmm.
right? They respect each other's regulations and laws, etc., and they have to. And so I think that that's very important. So when you know a regulation or a law in a certain state, it applies to all of them because the full faith and credit is given.
I think it's important too for understanding that a lot of people have the idea that they know that we were 13 colonies and we became a country, but they think that that happened really quickly, and like for a while, a good chunk of our history, people more thought of us as a confederacy, settle down civil war people. But confederacy in the traditional sense, where it's a collection of states that say we're going to work together, but we're still states. So that's why we're the United States. And it seems that a lot of people just think that for pretty much the entirety of our history, we were one united country. But that very clearly shows that that's a way to be like respectful of the sovereignty of the different states that used to make up the country.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's super funny too seeing not to throw any shade or anything, but a lot of European people on social media I see seem to not understand this, and they don't get that originally, maybe not so much now in practice, but originally the states were like mini countries essentially, and that was intentional. That was the way that we wanted to set things up, to have them be their own little individual countries, but then they banded together and made a bigger centralized government that was just originally supposed to look after the I guess the Confederacy.
Beautifully stated, and they could be wise to look at their own situation. Look at how
Hmm.
tiny some of those countries are over there, and they have the European Union.
Which basically
Same.
rules them. I mean, they got a similar situation to what we got actually, where their European Union was set up, presumably just to like oversee some things and like I don't know, like do paperwork or something. But now it's basically dictating what laws they have to pass and follow to every single member. And over here, our federal government is kind of doing a similar thing, where we were supposed to have the federal government just oversee things, protect the country, and collect taxes, and that was pretty much it. But now it's dictating what people must do, and like it's like every other week the DOJ or the president or Congress is coming out and being like, you can't have that state law state that we don't live in and have no stake in, and that there's really no legal standing, but we don't like it, so you can't have that law, and they try to push it top down.
Yes, and they're supposed to be the ones with the least amount of power,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh it's a very backwards situation, and people have backed off of believing that the individual has the most power in this country,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it's the local level government, and then it's the state, and then it's the federal, right? But now we have this, oh, we better worship Washington D.C. and like you mentioned, taxes. I'm gonna just pull this band-aid off real fast. Federal taxation is voluntary. Income tax is voluntary, folks. That 16th Amendment was not ratified properly, first of all. But beyond that, the federal basis of income tax, it's called federal gift taxes. And so when you filled out the W-4 the very first time, you were volunteering your money away. And you can correct that by telling the IRS, hey, I realized what I did and I didn't want to do that. And now you're never going to get more money from me. So I hope you liked what you got, because I'm never filing ever again. And that's okay to do. Okay, people are afraid to do this, but that's what's called civil disobedience, the second form or stage of revolution. Right, what we're doing right now is an informative form of revolution, and I hope that it can stop with civil disobedience, because the third stage is direct physical conduct, and we don't want to have to get there. But and I don't mean to be preachy, but I think a good thing to do is to stop funding our own slavery
Mm-hmm.
when it is indeed voluntary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so thanks, Rich. I hope that that's not too confrontational for you guys' platform, but
No,
it
no.
must
I
be
mean,
mentioned.
we are not fans of taxation by any mean. I do think that for most stuff, yeah, taxation is straight up theft, and I don't really. If you just break it down like logistically, I don't really see how you can argue against that. An entity is saying you have to give me money for this thing that you didn't support or have anything to do with, or you may not even been alive when it was passed, but now you have to give us your money to fund it, and if you don't, you'll be penalized. And by that, there's always the implied threat of force for that for every law. Because it's like,
Right.
even because a lot of people say, oh no, you just pay a fine. What if I don't pay the fine? Oh, okay, well then you get locked up. Well, what if I don't want to get locked up? Oh, okay, now we're talking. Now the force is going to get involved.
Right.
So, especially with the income tax, because I agree, because a lot of people don't know that we were doing just fine with the taxes that we had, and it was mostly tariffs that was keeping us going before the
Mhm.
income tax was passed. So, like, we don't need it. The only reason that we need it now is because we used it to fund a bunch of stuff that we didn't need, and now we have what do they call it? Every year for funding, there's there's like built-in funding. It's like they right off the bat they're like, okay, we're definitely paying for all this stuff. This is mandatory spending, and we have so much of that now from like Social Security and all these different bureaucracies that they say, oh, that's why we need it. It's like, no, we really don't.
I agree with you, and it's gotten out of hand. It's like an addiction. They are addicted to this type of mandated corruption. Well, they have gotten the population to believe that there will be a threat of force imposed upon us if we don't comply to their unlawful rulings
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you want to call that, right? What if we put the pressure on them and said, hey, there's going to be a threat of force unless you comply with our lawful rulings?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we have the gumption and gall to do something like that? If we do indeed have the power, which we do, and we are ordained by God to exert that here in this country, I mean, why should we? What if we gave them a notice saying, hey, if you try it, guess what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And these kinds of things. And I don't want to be radical, but I mean that if they want to treat us like that, then we must tell them where the dog lies. That's eventually where in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a responsible thing to do as opposed to obeying endlessly these folks. But I'm almost done reading through these articles, Rich, and so appreciate you.
Oh
So we
yeah, no
got Article
problem.
4, which is the relation among the states, the full faith and credit. And Section 2 is going to be the right of state citizens and the right of extradition, and they list those 1 through 3. Section 3 is admission of new states, so the creation of new states. Can you imagine? Get people together, get some land secured, and just start a new darn state, which would be a country by the Treaty of Paris. All right. Section 4 would be the Republican government guaranteed. I think that one is very, very important, so I'm going to read it quick. These United States shall guarantee to every state in its union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion on the application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. Right, and so then they go and they try to instigate domestic violence so that they can bring in their form of regulation. But
Mm-hmm.
what we if we read that carefully, it's going to protect us from invasion. Now, I don't know about your state, but where I live, we were quite conservative, and it seems to me we have been invaded by external people outside of this state in an effort to change our constitution in this state, etc. Right? Different rulings coming from people damn well were never born here because they don't even speak like us and they don't even like have the same values. That's what I mean by speak like us. I don't mean with an accent, and I'm not trying to be, but I'm saying it seems to me that these invasions are actively happening. All right. Article 5 is the amendment procedures. Article 6 is the supremacy of the Constitution and federal laws. Now, this is where I really wanted to get into Section 2, right? Or number 2. So it talks about the supremacy of the Constitution and federal laws. It numbers them 1 through 3. I'm going to go through number 2 real quick, like Rich.
Mm-hmm.
So this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. So sometimes the way they wrote back in the day is a little bit wordy and,
Yeah.
and complex. So the main thing that they're saying there is that if any rule anywhere is created that is contrary to the Constitution, it doesn't stand, notwithstanding, right? And so we can double down on that by looking at a couple of cases that were upheld by the Supreme Court. And they are Marbury versus Madison, and I will talk about that one really quick. This was Marbury versus Madison, 5 U.S. 137, 174, 176, Chief Justice John Marshall, and that says, quote, all laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. Okay.
I think we got
And
quite a
then,
few of those rattling around.
yeah,
Yeah.
rattling is a good way to put that too. Isn't that funny? And so it would become, in my opinion, it becomes the not only the right but the obligation of us individuals to blatantly break those very publicly,
Hmm.
and show that they are null and void. And okay, we're going to meet resistance on that, but we show that they're null and void, and then we defend ourselves in court if we must. But I think that it's very important that we. Oh, you want me to register my vehicle against my will? Well, here's what's up. I'm never going to use your license plate
Hmm.
ever. And I'm going to go in the most busy place in part of town, and I'm going to park right there, and I'm going to show everybody, and I'm going to write on my window in big red letters, I'm going to just do it, you know, and you should see my vehicle because I do exactly that. Uh, um, and then we've got Norton versus Shelby County. Now, this was 118 US 425 in 1886. The previous one, Marbury versus Madison, was in 1803, and they still stand to this day. So we've got in Norton versus Shelby County, an unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights, it imposes no duties, it affords no protection, and it creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. And that is a Supreme Court decision. And those two support the idea that we have a supremacy clause in the Constitution there in Article 6 and that subsection 2. So moving, did you want to add anything to that real quick, Rich? I don't mean to be so wordy
No, no,
here.
no. It's good. It's good. Jeez. As far as it's funny because those rulings you're talking about, if it's unconstitutional, it's null and void. Throw it out. It's not real law. And it just seems like more and more nowadays, there's less of a focus on figuring out if something goes against the Constitution and more of a focus on figuring out how, in the most convoluted way possible, you could just barely squeak a law by so that it's not really violating the Constitution. And that just seems like a very strange focus for me. And I don't know. In recent years, especially, it seems like the Supreme Court has really been playing it fast and loose with their not just their rulings, but even the justification and the explanation for the rulings. So like for
Yeah.
for me, I don't want to talk about too much, but the Roe v. Wade case, I will say, regardless of how you feel about that issue, if you go look at the arguments for that case and where they're drawing that conclusion from out of the Constitution and the amendments, it is very bizarre and shaky, I think, regardless of how you feel about the issue. And that was one of the cases for me where I was like, I really feel like you had a foregone conclusion and then you just had to fill in the gaps to get to that point. This doesn't feel like something that you very carefully walked through and checked against the Constitution and interpretations and stuff. So that's just me, and that's just one case example. And I know people have very strong opinions about that subject, and good for them, as they should. But just from a legal perspective, the legal arguments for why they made that decision, if you go and read them, they're very strange, and I think not very strong, to put it mildly.
Interesting. I love this. Are you talking about the original decision or the recent one where it was
The
overturned?
original one, not the overturning. The overturning, I thought, their legal argument and everything made general sense. I never got really the argument for, is it the, I can't remember the number meant, but the whole right to privacy being the thing that gave them that right was just really strange, and I don't think it was a very like direct, easy to connect argument to make.
Right. Yeah, it seemed like a designed situation, just like you were saying,
Hmm.
to be meeting their predetermined outcome that they'd like,
Yeah.
as opposed to following the legal way. Um, I appreciate what we're talking about here, and to compound or to put maybe cherry on top, what I have found in my discoveries is the very narrow, shaky path that seems to be taken anymore in passing any kind of rules seems to be founded on this one concept of interstate commerce. If they can tie it to interstate commerce, they seem to pass it,
Hmm.
and that is the main idea here is that they try to relate everything to interstate commerce. Well, Next time we'll have to get into my Bill of Rights stuff because
Yeah.
I was a jib jab today, boy. But
No, that's all right. It's good. It's not our fault. It's Zoom wanting extra money for sorry Zoom, but it's so that we could talk longer. But thank you so much for being on here again. It's always good to have you. It's great to talk to just people in general who are interested in this sort of things and others. So it's always good to have you. And just thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate this.
Yeah.
Now, you guys can. I'm going to send you my link tree. Maybe you can put
Hmm.
it in the description or what have you. But
Yes.
that's how
Yes.
anybody can get in contact with me. I'm trying to. One cool thing that I thought would be very useful is a rebuttal boot camp.
Hmm.
I'm going to hold in a Discord private sessions where I'll just yell at you the same way a police officer, or a sheriff, or any kind of policy enforcer would.
Hmm.
So you can practice rebutting the presumption that I have authority over you, and I'll do the same as a judge. And I'm going to be getting ideally five instructors to do the same. And maybe we'll even have it where all five of us are yelling at you at the same time. It depend. But it'll be a donation based situation. If that sounds cool to everybody,
Yeah.
you know how to find me. And you know, we'll talk more about that in the future with you and Matt, Rich. That
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like fun.
absolutely. So, guys, please go check out our good friend Andrew, Grow Through Deceit. We will have his links in the description. Go check him out. Look out for his rebuttal boot camp. That's going to be a future project coming out soon. We'll probably have him on again, so hopefully you guys will get to hear more about our stuff next time. Bill of Rights, perhaps, and let us know down below anything else you'd like to hear about in this sort of thing. American history, founding documents, case laws, how to take more control of yourself in a legal fashion and be sovereign. And yeah, so Andrew, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to having you
Thank
on
you.
again.
Appreciate you. Thanks,
All
Rich.
right, yeah, take care.